passes the condition, then it gets inserted, pushed inside the new array.
I just try to solve the one to pass. I am sending on the Slack this paragraph.
Okay.
If it's nice or not.
So this is how map works. If you want to use map, it means that you want to map the whole array to a new array. If there is a need to do that, you use map function. So I saw that lot of you, like he wrote some code that he wanted to get a new array containing the rating of each movie. So he created a new array and you used a for loop and you are using array.push and then just the value of the rating, right? So how can I expand it? So he had an array like this, an array of 4 movies, and each movie object has 5 properties: title, year, rating, votes, and running time. Running time is the length of the movie in seconds. Okay, so and if he wanted to get the rating, if you want to get rating of each movie in a new array, if you want to use map, you can do this. For each element in the array 2, which is a movie, give me the rating property of the movie. So if I run this code in JavaScript, it will give me these values, and it's same as 7.2, 7.4, 7.9 and 5.5. And if I wanted to have, like, this is ratings, right? And if you want to get movie titles, what will you do? This is what you will do, right? So if I do this, I get all the strings. Make sense? No? So if the task is that for each movie, give each movie a tag. It's a good film if it has a rating of greater than or equal to 7. It's an average film if it has a rating between 4 and 6, including both values. And if it's less than 4, then it's a bad film. Okay, so I'm working with a very small data set, just 4 films, but here we have one film with 5.5 rating and 3 films with more than 7. I will copy more data.
Yeah, I think I have the same mistakes on here. I created newer and then set the data and then I didn't use nothing.
But you are supposed to use map. The homework says that you have to use map. So if you learn some concept. So my concern is that in the last class you were taught how to use map, reduce and filter. And then there is some task that you have an array of movies and you have to find which movie is good, which movie is bad, and then you have to calculate the average rating and then couple of things, right? You know how to iterate over an array. You can use the for loop, you can use for each. But if you don't write your code using map, reduce and filter, then you will not learn that concept. If you don't use arrow functions, so if you are struggling in using some concepts, then you should ask questions on Slack.
So with this exercise, we are not supposed to mix in for each altogether.
So
it was only map filter.
Yeah, you are supposed to use map, filter, and reduce as much as possible.
It's not just about this exercise. Whenever you can use map or filter or reduce, you have to use those.
Okay, because as of the number I was talking about, I tried to use map, I failed, so I went back to
If you see that you can't use that one, then okay, maybe it means that you can't use it. Then we have to
That is
check.
what-
Then you need to tell me
Okay.
that you have problem in understanding map function, right? Or you don't know how filter works. So here we have some films. I added some couple of them, and the task is that for each movie we have to tag the film as good, average, or bad. Okay. So if I have to write a function, what will I? What should I write to implement that? The rating is greater than equal to 7, then it's good film, right? So if movie dot rating is greater than equal to 7, then return good. Else if movie dot rating equal to how much? 6 is 4. Yeah. Then return average, else return bad. So if you give this function a movie, then it will be able to tell you if it's a good film, bad film, or average film, right? So if I just do this, console log movies, I will just rename it to movies. What will I get? So if I use map and I give a function to the map, then it's going to, for each element in the map in the array movies, it's going to call this function find movie quality, and whatever is returned from this function will be the value in the new array. So if I just go and copy this code, so this is what I get. Does anyone have any question? Do you understand how map is working?
I tried to do that at first, but
Can you repeat?
I didn't know how.
What?
If Atlas, can you repeat it? Function, this function.
So
And also, I was thinking, if you write greater or equal to 4, it might improve those in 7 and 8.
so then
Because here they tell us between 4 and 7, the average has to be, is it 4 and 5? The question?
4 to 6, yeah.
it says 4 to 6. So in like if there is something wrong, I can like write code here. Movies greater than 4 and movie dot rating less than equal to 6. Else if movie dot rating less than equal to 3. So if there is a rating,
Or less than 4, for instance.
it says 0 to 3, I guess. Yeah. So if it's between 6 and 7, then you will not get anything from this code, right? Anyway, but you should have written anyway. So first thing is that it says that to find a tag, this is the rule. The rule is that if rating is greater than equal to 7, then it's going to be good film. If it's between 4 and 6, then it's going to be average. If it's bad, if it's 0 to 3, then it's a bad film. So I'm just implementing a function which will do that for me, right? And if you don't know map, if you don't know how map works, then what will you do? You will say that you will create a new array called tags, and then you will do movies dot for each, if you know about for each, and then given a movie, it will find its tag dot push find movie quality movie. This is another way to do it, the same thing, right? No? Tags. There is a third way to do it, which is using a for loop. For let I equals 0, I less than movies dot length I plus plus, and so if I use this for loop, I am getting the same result, right? And if I use this code, it will not work for me because I have already defined tags as constant, so I need to reload this. Movie is not defined. Movies is defined now, and then it can be this code. Find movie quality is not defined. What am I doing? Anyway, I will just copy everything. Where did I made a mistake, it seems. Line number 55. Okay, so it's giving me same result. Okay, but if I go and make like this movie, if I change it to 6.2, it will not have a rating as per the current code. It will be undefined because the code which we have written, it does not handle a case which is between 6 and 7. Okay, that's why I wrote this is greater than 6. Then it will, if anything is less than 7, then it's average. If it's less than, and this would be the other difference. So if you have learned about map, then you should use map. Okay, so the task was not to just print this good, bad, average for each film. The task was that tag each film, give each movie a tag. Okay, so right now this each movie object has 5 properties. So what we want to do is that we want to add a new property called tag, and it should have a value like this is 6 point, this should be average, right? and this is 6. This will also be average. This would be average. This would be good. So we want a new property for each object. So we already have a list of objects, and for each object we want to return a new object. So how will that work? So we can write a code like this. For each movie, since you are using map, it's one single movie. If its rating is greater than equal to 7, then assign tag property to good. If it's greater than 4, then assign it to average. If it's greater than else, assign it bad and return the film.
Actually, you should have inserted the tag before and left it empty. So if there is no tag
No,
in
so
the object,
this is not like right now you are seeing that I have created this array in my code, right? But the task was that you have a data source like this. This is a JSON URL, and which is a dump of IMDb. So it has lot of films. So you don't have access to this array. So someone has this information and they have just 5 things, and you want to have a 6th information for each movie, and you know that you can calculate it, so you want to update the JSON data before using it. So you are saying that if I have access to this, then I should have added it before. But in cases where you don't have access to the source data and you want to do some computation and update the array, and then use the array for further whatever you want to do with that array, in that case you can use map, or you can use a for loop or something and update the of each object in the array and use it afterwards.
so you're having like a copy of this.
Yeah, so
array
so
and
whenever
then-
you use map, it will return you a new array.
Yeah.
Okay,
But it wouldn't be saved.
so
It would be in the memory just.
so let us say we face some data from GitHub, right? I am not GitHub. GitHub is a different company. They have their own database, but they allow me to access a list of repos under a user's account.
Yes.
And for each repo, you see number of stars on GitHub, right? So, and suppose I make a rule for my application that if number of stars is more than 1000, then it's a popular repo. Otherwise, it's not that popular. But that's not a rule defined by GitHub. So GitHub will not tell me that if a repo is popular or not. It will just tell me what is the number of stars for each repo. So I will fetch all the repos from GitHub API. I will make that calculation. I will update the array which I am going to use, and then but I cannot ask GitHub to change its API for me, right? They cannot keep changing for everyone.
You don't have the permission, for example.
I mean, if you are a company, you will not change your code for every user, right?
Yeah, sure.
So you are saying that we give our data in this format, and if you have number of stars, then you can calculate whatever you want to do. So they are giving minimal information using which you can build an app. But sometimes the information which you have, it will not be enough to render the UI you want. So if you want to show if a film is good or bad, then a clean way is that you use map operation and update each object and then use it.
Can I write the
I will post it on Slack.
code? So you are the product.
Yes.
Can you give us an example on the use?
Yes, 1 minute. So this is the movies, and then I am updating it to tagged movies. Okay. So this is the code for tagged movies. If I run this code, Then I have,
Please use a different page. Too much
Yeah.
time.
I'm using some extension, so it's causing error. Anyway, so we had movies, an array of length 6, and now we have tagged movies. And each movie has a tag good or something. Okay, and then what? Then, if you want to find the number of movies which are good, then you can just do tag movies dot filter movie dot tag, it equals to good, and then its length. Okay, do you understand? So the same thing, if you update this information, like if you create a new array, and then you can do these things. Good movies count equals this, average movies count equals this, bad movies count equals this.
Reduce and filter. There has to be a function. It has to be a function.
I am just asking you to focus on these 3 lines for now. Do you understand these 3 or not? How I am calculating the count for good, average, and bad films using filter.
From the example you've shown us, I saw you adding those two arrows for arrow function.
Yeah.
It has to be there for it to be implemented. Yeah.
Like here. So here I am using an arrow function, but it can be some other function also. So if you notice, I was using this function in map, right? Find movie quality. It just needs to be a function. So arrow function is also a function. It's just a different style to write a function. I'm not using function keyword here. Any questions about map? So the idea is that sometimes using for each is better. Map will not make sense because you don't want to return anything for each element in the array. You just want to do some operation. So you should not use map. Then you should use for each maybe. But if you learn all these concepts, then it will be much easier for you during React class because React uses a lot of map to render UI elements.
My other question is when you have like an array and there is a nesting of arrays, can you access a nested array using instead of going through the for loop?
Okay.
What do you have and what do you want in output?
Maybe I want to access data from a nested.
What does it mean like to access that? To print it? Only?
Yeah, to print it.
Okay.
So let us say
Or to put it in DOM.
you have an array is nested array, nested D, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Like this case?
And within, say, one array inside there is also having another array.
It's elements.
Yeah. So it can be nested on multiple level. Now what you want to do?
Can I use map to go direct maybe to?
So this can be. So it can be written like this: nested array dot map then you know that the element type is an array, right? Array1 dot map number which can be x, and you want to do x square.
Array1 is not really a name, but it's confusing. So now when you use map on nested array, every element is going to be one of those arrays, right? Of 3 elements each.
So child array would be 1, 2, 3 in the first run, it would be 4, 5, 6 in the second run, and 7, 8, 9 in the third run. Okay? And when it's 1, 2, 3, for each value you are going to multiply it by 2 and return it. So you will get a nested array which would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then 14, 16, and 18. Okay, I did square instead of multiplying by 2. So you got a square of each number in the nested array. So if you look at the code, it's very short. So if you understand this concept and if you practice it at home, you watch some videos, read some blog posts, just make sure that you understand this concept. Then once you know how to use this in different scenarios, then it will give you a lot of power if you're working with list of objects, array or something. So it looks like that it's just some concept and you have to implement, you have to finish some homework. But if you start working on a real application, then you will need to process there would be lot of instances where you have to process a list of arrays. And the code for, if you use map, the code would be very short. So if you write less number of lines to achieve something, then it becomes less headache to change that code, because you know that you need to just change 1 or 2 lines, and you are sure that it works. But if the same thing is being done in 20 lines, then you don't know if your change will break it or not. You have to be more focused to make that same change.
It's a smart way also to write the map function.
So map was not there in JavaScript before ECMAScript 6, and before 2015 it was not there. In 2015 you got arrow functions, map, filter, reduce. It was not there before, like it was not there 3-4 years back.
Yeah, because in the map function what I have got that we can do this by the for loop.
Yes, you can do same thing using for loop.
For loop, but in map function they have included everything for the for loop, and we just put our values.
Yes.
And then
So you don't need to write for loop. It's internally it will run a loop for you, and it will call this function for each element in the array.
I have just confused with the arrow function. Like this arrow function will find out what will they do exactly.
So now we are talking about two things. First thing is that you are confused about map. Is everyone clear about map function? Do you get what it works? It just returns you a new array with same size, and it applies the function you have given to the map for each element in the first array, in the original array.
If there is anything missing, then it will be undefined. It will print it in the array. Is that
That would be the output from the function. So if you don't handle one element well, then yeah. So
I think for myself, I understand map as in it transforms something, but I get the problem.
It transforms each element of the array in it. Yeah.
But I get a problem of implementing it.
Yeah, okay. It's hard for you to find the places where to use it. Yeah, it
I
happens.
know what it does, but
Yeah, during the first time it's normal, but
Yeah.
it's important to get used to it.
then you should do free code camp exercises. They have lot of examples. Yes.
Nested array, is it a code or function?
It's I just wrote I chose a name for this variable. I could just call it x or y, anything.
And can we give, for example, to 1, 2, 3 value? any name instead of 1, 2, 3 beside.
In what?
So it has to be a number because
So
we
the
have
kind of operation I am doing, I am calculating the square. But if it was something else, then like you are saying that you want to give this
And
a.
then we give a name to refer when we call, for example, to 1, 2, 3.
So it's I'm. So if you look at this array, this is like this is one array,
Yeah.
and this array has 3 sub array or 3 child arrays, right?
But we need only one. We need only 1, 2, 3 instead to take 4, 5, 6, so and the rest. We need only the one.
You
How
just
can we call?
you just want the first element of the array.
How
The-
can we call it?
Then you can just do. It will return you the first element of the array. And if you want to just get one, then it will give you the like.
This is
so this would be this will be one.
Yeah. So arrow functions, like if you want to implement then it can be given a value x this is, and if you want to implement same thing using regular functions, it should be
And these two are equivalent. They do the same thing.
and if you want to implement add or multiply will take 2. So if you so by default in an arrow function we put parentheses for the parameters. Here a and b are 2 parameters, but if you have just one parameter you are allowed to not put parentheses. So this is a valid code, but if you have more than one then you have to use parentheses. Okay, and you can return a into b, and if I have to do the same thing, so this is the difference between those two, arrow functions and normal functions. So this is a much better syntax, right? And if you want to, if you have to, so it's a very simple form of arrow functions. If the body of the function needs to be in more than one line, like it was case like here I had to implement if else if and then do something, then you have to use a curly brace and then you have to make sure that you return something. And if you just use one line definition, then whatever you put here it will be returned as the value. So the arrow functions make lot of sense. You should like if you use arrow functions, then there is something called this keyword. So like sometimes you will see code like function do something and then it does something, and there would be this dot abc or something. So this keyword refers to this function, and if this function was inside some other code and you wanted to access this value of this, then it is referring to that. So you will need to say const that equals this. So this is that will have the value of this outside this scope. Arrow functions don't have this problem. If you say, then it will refer to this from the whatever was the value of this in that context. So once you learn about, there would be cases where you have to use this keyword when you start doing more Node.js other things, then you would be writing code using this keyword. So there you will find that if you use arrow function, you will make it will be very easy to understand what you are trying to do. But like if you implement 100 lines of code and your code is not working because the value you think this has is something else. So if you use arrow functions, it will not affect this keyword. So it has some benefits. Now you are talking about using reduce, right? Reduce with objects. So what can it be? Suppose you want to calculate a function for calculate a sum of all the elements in the array numbers. So it's like you want to have one value for the whole array. So whenever you want to have one value for an array, it means you are trying to reduce the whole array to one value. So one kind of reduction can be that you want to calculate sum of something. You want to multiply each number and then get something. So if you multiply two things, you get one thing. So you can keep multiplying and then you will have something in the end, and that would be a single value. If you keep adding, then after each addition two numbers become one number, right? If you want to do subtraction or something, so we use reduce whenever you have to reduce the array to one single object, one single value or something. So in this case it can be numbers dot reduce, and first argument is the accumulated value. It means whatever, like if you want to calculate sum, it would be total, and then you would get the current value of the current element of the array, and then you can say total plus x and then initial value of total. This is the syntax. You can go to Mozilla Developers Network, MDN, JavaScript, reduce. Just search, type these three things. This would be the first result, and then here you can read about it in more detail. So reduce takes a callback function and an initial value. This arrow means it's an optional. So JavaScript would try to have a default initial value depending on what is the code. So accumulator is the first argument of the callback function. Then you have current value. Then you have current index and array also.
Why do they write prototype in between those two
Hmm?
symbols? Why do they write prototype?
Oh, okay.
So the array class in JavaScript, if you want to implement a method on one type of object, then you had to implement it to dot prototype. So if you will see that it's string dot prototype something, array dot prototype something, it means that all the instances of array will have this method available.
I see from our code we don't write
It's
prototype.
always
Because we are not implementing array class. We are not implementing our own classes. We are just using existing classes. But if you had to implement your own class, then you would implement it like this.
prototype is a property that is present in any array object in this case.
So, do you know how object-oriented programming is done? Object-oriented programming, classes and everything? No?
So anything that is inside this prototype, any functionality implemented, like reduce right, reverse, you know that that method is usable in any array you're going to create. And why? Because you haven't implemented them, right? But you still can use reduce. But why is that? Because any variable that you declare of type array is going to have all those features implemented already, because they are part of the prototype.
A little bit I've understood, but I think I need to read about it.
You don't need to worry about prototypes.
Yeah, don't
I will
worry.
say don't read about it. Okay, so anyway, so here I am using two arguments, total and x, and it will give me a sum of numbers. So if I had to paste this code, I would be getting how much? 15. And if I had to multiply, I would do this, and then what would I get? Yeah, so if I put 0, then it's wrong. If I put 1, it's 120. If I don't put anything, then also it's 120, because JavaScript is able to look at my code and it knows that I am doing multiplication, so the default value should be 1. So your JavaScript engine is really smart. So this is reduction, and if I had to do subtraction, it does not make sense, because how will you do 1 minus 2 minus 3 minus 4 minus 5? If you want to do something like that, like 0 minus 1 minus 2, then it's like adding everything and putting a minus sign before it. So that does not make much sense. And but if you want to do, then you can do it. That if you had to divide everything, like 1 divided by 1, whatever you get, divide that by 2, then divide by 3, then divide by 4, you could do this, and then it will be a decimal. So this is like what you can do with numbers. And if you had a list of object, like marks of, I have list of 4 objects and 4 students, and all of them have some marks for some class test or something. And if you want to calculate the total of the marks, sum of all the marks, then what will you do? It's very similar. Total student instead of x, since it's an object, I'm going to access the current marks using this property, student.marks obtained. And if I want to calculate average, I have a sum. I can just divide it by the number of students. That would be sports.length, and I have the average value.
Please try something. So,
Oh, I did not copy this. That's why. See, the problem is that in this case, my array is of type object, right? Like the element type for this array is object. In this case, it was all numbers. Since it was numbers, JavaScript could say that you are going to add this thing, so initial value should be 0. But if you are working with objects, then it by default it will give you an empty object as the initial value. So I need to put my own value here. That even if I am working from objects, I am going to reduce it to a number, and I want the initial value of 0. If I don't do that, then I will have this. What it has done is that it has given me an object, and object plus 10 would be this. So if I have an object and I do 10, it gives me 10 for some reason. I don't know what is going on, but this is the correct syntax for this. Now I have the sum of all these numbers 10, 12, 11 and 13, and I can divide it by the length, and it will give me the average score of the class 11.5. So what would be inside this reduce or map or filter? It will depend on the kind of array you are working with. So if you are working with objects, you would want to write something different. If you are working with numbers, the code would be different. You want me to show another example with reduce? Hmm? I will post everything. Then we have filter. So the way filter will work, so you have a list of students with some marks, and you want to accept only those who have gotten 12 or more marks. So there is a criteria that people who have gotten less than 12, they have not achieved something. It can be they did not pass the exam, or it can be something else. So you want to filter everyone who has more score than 12. Then you say score dot marks of 10 greater than equals to 12. So in filter, the function which you give, it should return true or false. So it's a test for each element in the array. So you have to write a function which will say that this element is allowed or not. If the test function says that the value I give for this element is true, then you would have this element in the output of the filter function, and if it's false, then it will not be there. So we have just those two with 12 and 13 marks. And it always, you can use, like, let us say we have this property. And you want to just get those for whom this thing has some value or not. So you can just do this check. Hmm?
The project.
then you get everything, because by default value of array is not falsy. So there is this thing which is a boolean thing, and so let us define a function to check if something is true or false. So we can is falsy equals given a value x, check if x is falsy or not. So if not x means it's false. So if I give it 0, 0 is falsy, 1 is not falsy. So 1 is true. If you give 0, 0 is not true. If you give an object, object is true.
It's like truth.
Yeah, truthy. So it's you're calculating if this is equivalent of true or false. So an empty object or empty array is true, and if you say undefined, it's like false. If you say null, it's false. If you say an empty string, it's false. But array is not false. So you have to say that dot length greater than 0. If you do that, then you get just those things which have some values in the array. Let us say that out of 4 objects, just 3 had this property and 4th one did not have. So it's not a very clean data. And you are writing some code, then what will happen?
It didn't even show you that there's empty objects. Yeah, here.
No, I'm using filter. So it means that give me just those things for which this is true.
Okay.
So it was true for just these two,
For the
right?
two of them.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah, is this clear why the last example worked?
yes. So
Because otherwise we are not ready for the next.
yeah. So if I use dot length is greater than 0, I got just these two results, right? What we wanted to have.
Because there are some arrays that are empty and some others are not empty.
Yeah.
So what we are having in the new array is only those elements that have that property, items in the back,
Yeah.
which is not empty. And so yeah, we get only.
But if I just do that, return me if items in the bag has a truthy value, then you get all of them.
Yes.
Because even an empty array is like equivalent to true. Like if you calculate a boolean value for an empty array, it will be true. But if you say dot length, you get just those two, because if an array is empty, then its length property would be empty, and 0 is equal to false. So you can do this, or a better thing can be this, but this is also correct for this
Can
thing.
you open the two of them to see like what they are? Yeah.
And you can see that items in the bag is an array with more than 0 elements. In this case, it's 3. Yeah.
So let us say, what is his name? Basel now. So here is one more example where you have an array of objects and you want to write a map filter or something, and not all properties are present in all the objects. So it's not a very good data. Okay. So if you want to write filter, like in this case, if I run this code, then what will I get? So I'm just going to comment this. So you get that length of undefined property. So in this function, you are going, like for each object, you are trying to access the items in the bag, and then you are saying if the length of this thing is greater than 0, then filter, then give this element back. But it goes well for these first three, but it fails here, and the error message is that undefined cannot read property length of undefined. So if you have an object like this, you try to access something which is not there, it will return undefined. And if you get undefined and if you want to do this, it will throw you an error. It's equivalent to saying undefined dot length. But you cannot access length or anything else on undefined because it's undefined. Right? So the fixed code here would be that this is true and then go for length. It means that if it is undefined, then it will fail here itself, right? I am putting an AND, so it will AND will pass only when both of these evaluate to true. So if in this case you don't have that property, this will be false. But in every other case, because it's an array, it will be true, right? And if it's true, then check if the length is greater than equal to 0. So it's true and 2. So true and true is true, true and true is true, true and false is false, and here it's false. Since it's already false and it's an AND operation, JavaScript knows that I don't need to go and check the next one, because if I have to do AND operation and first one is already false, then the result is going to be false, right? So this code will work. And if you have to implement this same thing using a normal function, check if bag not empty, and given a student object, if not student dot items in bag return false. I mean, if I don't have items in the bag property, return otherwise. Return these two codes are similar. This is the expanded version of this code. So sometimes you would not be able to write arrow function in one go. Then it makes sense to write something like this, and once you understand why it works, why it does not work, then you can translate it into this. But if this becomes a very long function and it's not readable, then you should switch back to this style.
It's more clear for me, like the
Yeah.
normal function.
Yes.
Because I didn't work with the arrow before.
Yeah. If you add more than 4, like more than 2 operators in and you have long variable names, it becomes difficult to read this code because it will be outside the screen, and then you have to scroll to understand it, and then it will take a lot more time. Now, do you understand how to use reduce and when it will fail and when it will not fail? Hmm?
Can get me an example. So,
What?
we get an example and solve it, but I think we get the.
So I'm not going to do the homework now because we have already discussed
the
for
concept.
the concept, and if you should try to rewrite your code, all of you who have not used map reduce everywhere, like you did not use, but you did not do it like this, right? You used a filter operation to find good movies, bad movies. Hmm? Yeah, so you did not update the array. You did not update the object. You just returned the array, right? So the task was that give each movie a tag. But what you were doing that you had three different lines and one line for finding all of them which are good, then finding all of them which are average, and then finding all of them which are bad. Hmm? Yeah, this is not clear. I will update this. Yeah, I will update this so that in the next class they don't face this problem. Okay. Yes.